Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to the 48th lecture in the Janal Talks series. In season 3 now we are. We're very excited for this one because this is the one we've been building up to over the past 5 lectures of the season. I hope everyone can hear me and I'm audible. I'm going to begin by quickly introducing the program. And then also going to go into an introduction of our speaker for the day, and then it'll be over to Robin. About the Janal archive. The Kerala Museum was established in Kochi in 1987 by R. Madhavan Nair and was founded to provide opportunities for learning in history, the fine arts and the performing arts. In 2022, marking its 35th year, the museum launched the Janal Digital Archives, a program that develops digital archives, exhibitions, and stories on community histories from Kerala. The Janal Talks lecture series forms part of this program, and it offers public conversations on Kerala's past, present, and future. Supported by the Geojit Foundation, it fulfills the museum's mission of making history accessible to all. Since its inception in 2022, Janal Talks has created a platform for scholars, practitioners, thought leaders, and audiences to connect with evolving stories of Kerala's plural histories, society, culture, politics, and environment. We extend our heartfelt thanks to our sponsors, collaborators like Professor Jeffrey, and the entire Kerala Museum community for making Janal Talks a space where knowledge, inquiry, and public dialogue flourish. The current season 3 continues this approach and shifts focus to reflecting on how landscapes, trade, and everyday lives have influenced Kerala's collective memory and identity. At the first lecture of this season, Pepper, Landscape and Memory, Dr. Pius Malikandathil examined how the spice trade shaped Kerala's environment and social fabric, reminding us that physical landscapes are also repositories of memory and meaning shaped by interaction, aspiration and change. Season 3 is inspired by the photographs gifted to the Janal Archive by Kerala scholar Lesley Jeffrey, our speaker for the day, author of The Decline of Nair Dominance and many other works. And these are stills of Kerala of the early 80s. About Professor Lesley Jeffrey. Lesley Jeffrey first lived in India from 1967 to 69 as an English teacher in a government school in Chandigarh. He first visited Kerala in December of 1967, and a lifelong fascination began, which generated 2 books about Kerala. He taught politics and history in 2 Australian universities, and he now lives in Melbourne and is a citizen of Australia and Canada. I'm just going to let a few more people in, and yeah. Yes, okay. About the talk today. Our talk is titled Old Kerala Homes Through a Visitor's Lens, 1983, and shortly you will see why. In 1983, Lesley Jeffrey and his wife Lesley Jeffrey, with their newly purchased Nikon camera and their driver Gopi, spent 10 days traveling from Kanyakumari to Kochi, photographing old buildings. And fascinated by the Nair Taravad diorama in the Napier Museum in 1971, Jeffrey wanted to see such houses before they completely disappeared. Amidst the Gulf boom, when remittances were transforming Kerala and old buildings were being torn down, they captured 400 black and white photographs. This talk, the first of a 2-part series, revisits that expedition, its images and the Kerala of the 1980s. Over to you, Robin.
Thank you very much, Aditi. And thank you for having me, and thank the Kerala Museum for being agreeable to providing a home for the photographs that came out of the little expedition that my wife and I made in 1983. We'd both been coming to Kerala through the 70s. Once we were married, the two of us came together. So it wasn't new to us in that way. And as Aditi said, I'd first come across the Ghats down from Coorg to Kannur in 1967 in December, and was absolutely I was struck by two things. I was struck by a whole bunch of little girls coming out of primary school, which I was teaching in North India. It wasn't all that common. And red flags everywhere, because the first United Front government had come to power at that stage. So it was for a very innocent Canadian, it was a very visual kind of introduction as we wove our way down the Ghats. And I never forgot it. And I was back in Kerala in the early 1970s as a graduate student working on a PhD. And once I'd got the PhD, I was back as an employee of a university, a research fellow, doing research to turn the thesis into a book, and then continuing research on Kerala and India generally. And of course, the thing one noticed from the late 1960s to the early 1980s was the Gulf. The Gulf boom came in 1973 with the great oil crisis, I guess, or it accelerated at that stage. And by 1983, 10 years later, you could see the changes very visibly. We noticed them particularly in Chennai and in Bangalore as it was then, in antique shops, where if you went into a shop, you would very often see just household items or even great doorway architraves, beautifully carved, that had come from buildings in Kerala. The woodwork that was coming out of Kerala at that time was remarkable and very eye-catching. And so when we came in 1983, I was working on another book, but we thought it would be wonderful to take some time and try a little bit systematically to look at the various buildings that we thought were disappearing all too rapidly and being replaced by concrete public works department style Gulf houses, as people call them, often painted in all sorts of colors that made them stand out. The buildings and the landscapes that we considered beautiful and had taken for granted were disappearing, and we thought that we needed a camera. I'd always been a bit of a snob about cameras as an outsider in India. I was with cohorts that said only tourists have cameras. But I greatly regret it now. I wish I'd had it for the first 15 years I was coming to India. But in any case, my mother-in-law gave me a very nice little Nikon camera. One lens, single lens only, fit in the palm of your hand, but able to take very good quality pictures, providing the photographer wasn't a terrible goose and not very good at taking photographs. But I think I got better, and I'd had a bit of practice before we came to Kerala. The photographs in the collection that the Kerala Museum is going to be able to archive, the photographs in that collection are not all very good. Some of them are awful duds, but there are amongst them some photographs that I think are worth being able to preserve for others to make judgments about how useful they might be. In those days, cameras used film, and we came to India in 1983 with 15 rolls of good black and white film, each taking about 35 shots. So we had about 400, and we bought some East German film in Kerala because we were shooting so many. But we ended up, I think, with about 400 pictures. When we came back to Australia, I had those photographs printed out or exposed in our photo lab at my university in Melbourne. And we printed out a few prints for framing that were really rather nice. One of which is the the poster for today's event. We did that, but the rest of them remain just as thumbnail prints, prints from the negative that gave you an idea of what was there, but were never blown up in their full glory. Finally in 2021, just as we were coming out of COVID, I thought something had to be done with the negatives. So I went to a photo laboratory here in Melbourne, which is very good at digitizing photographs from negatives. And they digitized all 400 of them for me in two formats. In the TIFF format, that's the very, very big one, in which every single photograph takes about 175 megabytes, huge files, and also as JPEGs, in which a photograph takes about 12 megabytes in the format that they've been transferred. So the photos that are here are useful for various sorts of purposes should anyone want to use them. But I felt in 2021 that these photographs, or some of them, occasional ones, might be useful to others, to researchers, publishers, students, filmmakers, designers, journalists, and people researching and writing family histories, which are so popular these days. I'm delighted the museum is willing to take the photographs in both formats as part of their archive and make them available to the public. Over 2 weeks at the beginning of this year, we transferred even the big files to the Kerala Museum. And the files were so big that we could really do only one roll of film a night. So it took a good 2 weeks to transfer them all from midnight in Melbourne to late night and early morning in Kerala. Now, the purpose of today's talk is, from my point of view, to highlight that the Kerala Museum now has this resource, and also to use the resource to the photos to focus on aspects of old Kerala, the sort of aspects that made my wife and me want to make the imperfect record that we did in 1983, and to contribute something to the understanding of Kerala's past. Now, I should explain my fascination with the Taravad, and particularly with something that is in this building. You should see on your screen the Napier Museum as it was in 1983. It just passed its 100th anniversary, and it is a very imposing, unforgettable kind of building. But inside it is what had fascinated me and even my wife for as long as we'd seen it, and that is I need to show you the previous. That is the Taravad in the glass case in the museum. And it's not easy to photograph, as you can see. This is about as good an overview as one can get of it. But it's an elaborate construction of an idealized, very romanticized idea of what a Taravad would have looked like in the late 19th century. Basically, at the time that K.C. Raman Pillai was writing Martandavarma and those first great historical novels in Malayalam. The Taravad in the museum is very much an ideal type. You see all sorts of people, but it's a huge joint family. We don't know, there's nothing in the diorama to tell us, but it's going to be a matrilineal family, all messing from the same kitchen and sleeping in the same dwelling, in this distinctive building made with all the wonderful woods of Kerala. The examples I've got here don't really do it justice, though I had to include this one, even though it's not a good photograph, but they did have to have an elephant to make it look particularly, what would we say, exotic. And it depicts in various corners of the diorama people going about daily tasks. Here are the women, I think she's splitting coconuts, and the other one is using mortar and pestle. So that's what really captured us and led us on the expedition that we embarked on. The diorama, as I've said, I think is beautiful, made by very skilled craftspeople who knew the workings of the old Taravad, and also knew how to deal with depicting people as human forms and making these exquisite little buildings to depict the nature of the wooden constructions that were being put up in the Taravads in the 18th and 19th century. I think that the diorama was made, I think, for the British Empire exhibition in London in 1924, 1925. But I know nothing about who ordered it, who made it, or how it got to London. Indeed, I'm not even sure that it was for the London exhibition. Perhaps people who eventually see this broadcast may have information about how it got to, what was the nature of the origins of the diorama. Anyway, it was the diorama that really was the spark that sent us on our photographic tour. We were looking for something that looked a little bit like it, and we didn't find anything quite like it, but that's because it's an extraordinary thing. But we did find buildings that had many of the characteristics. The remainder of this talk aims to illustrate the different sorts of photos in the collection. And to do this, I've created a few arbitrary categories and chosen 2 or 3 examples to illustrate different aspects of the collection and things that can be found in it. And I hope some of them may tickle the curiosity of a variety of people. But first, let me tell you a little bit about the route of our 10-day travel. The map on the screen is fairly indicative. If we were doing this again, we'd probably spend a bit of time drawing up a proper map of our travels. But we began from the Trivandrum Hotel in Trivandrum, and of course the Trivandrum Hotel itself was once a glorious institution. Now I think not quite what it was 40 and 50 years ago. But in any case, we were staying and had done on a number of occasions previously in the Trivandrum Hotel in YMCA Road. And from there, with our trusty driver, Gopi, we headed north to Tonakil, Nindakara, Kanyakumari, and we spent the first night in Alleppey in a fairly mosquito-infested room. I wasn't very popular with my wife that night. We went on from there to Kochi and stayed for where we had 3 nights in Kochi, and from there went out to Palgat and other sites around the Ernakulam and the old Cochin area. We came back to Kottayam and had a couple of nights in Kottayam and the environs of Kottayam, finally back to the Trivandrum Hotel, and then finished up by going down to Nanjanad, the old Travancore area that's now part of Tamil Nadu, to Aruvipuram, which I think is still in Kerala, but then to Nair, which is now, of course, in Tamil Nadu. How we found the places we visited through friends who advised us and introduced us to their friends. And everywhere people were terribly welcoming and generous, and almost pleased to see snoopy people wanting to take photographs of buildings and kitchens and so on. And Gopi, the driver, was patient and a very willing companion, though I think often a little bit mystified about why we were going down these roads to look at these silly old buildings, because we could have gone and looked at some really nice new buildings, but that wasn't where we were going. So let me go on and look at the categories that I've arbitrarily divided the photos into. And the first one is houses, and particularly their construction. And again, I don't know nearly enough about how the old houses were built. What we did think was worth emphasizing, though, was that the great old Taravads were just one form of dwelling in the old Kerala, and there were much simpler houses where simpler people lived and passed happy days, I'd like to think. This is Kumaranashan, the great social reformer and poet's house at Tonakil. as it was in November 1983. And I think it had had a little bit of restoration done to it then to at least maintain it. But it still maintained the look of a very humble kind of house for a great man to have come out of. We on the way, in the course of our journeys, we passed this hut near Kalpakavadi, and that seemed to be worth photographing because it was the simplest form of hut, but it was interesting in its construction because it's all made of matting. It's a product, I think, of the coconut palm. Remarkable in many ways. We got more of what we were looking for in terms of identifying something similar to the diorama in the museum at Todikad House near the Woodlands Hotel in Ernakulam, and I hope it's still there today. The great peaked roof, and then it had the same shape as this cardboard model of one of these houses that we found in Roscote Bungalow in Trivandrum. The bungalow, many of you may know if you're Trivandrum people, but the bungalow is designed as a nalakettu with the four walls and the courtyard in the middle, the open courtyard in the middle. And it was very difficult until the drone was invented, and I'd love to have a drone now to try to capture some of these buildings. But prior to that, to get an aerial view was very hard. But at some point, occupants of the Roscote bungalow had this one made out of cardboard, but it does give you a sense of how a nalakettu would have worked, with rooms coming off this central core, rooms in all four directions, all with openings both to the outside and to the inside central core. So an ability for people to come and go without having to go necessarily through the main entrance over here. So it's a very interesting example, I think. Once you get inside the houses, of course, you get a different view of the nalakettu. This is a particularly elaborate one in Todikad House in Kochi, and a lovely one with the wonderful examples of the carving. And this one less well put together, and in an Ambudri house, as it turns out, but nevertheless built around the same pattern, and with the tulsi plant in the middle, which of course is very common in many of these many of the houses. Having seen a number of houses, the other attraction for us was to look at the various items in the houses, the beautiful brasswork that had been done at different times. This is a door fixture from the Velutambi house in Nanjanad, now in the Tamil country, as it was in 1983. I don't know what's happened to that house now. Again, I'm sure people who might be watching this will know what the outcome has been for some of these old houses. This is from Ellencut House, again in the Nanjanad area. Beautiful, beautiful vessels. Whether they were made in Kerala, how they were made, how they reached Kerala, I don't know. But again, it's one of those things. The photos, as they say, pose more questions than they answer. The other aspect were the wonderful kitchen items. I'm glad I didn't have to wield that mortar and pestle, because it looks a very, very heavy mortar, and it's a huge kind of pestle. Again, another aspect that so attracted us, and was one of the things that caught our eyes in the antique shops of Bangalore and Chennai, was the woodwork. Now, this is just a chair leg from one of the great chairs in the Velutambi house. I don't fully understand what's going on. There's an elephant holding up a horse. I don't know. I look forward to somebody interpreting some of these things for me at some stage. Again, a capital, just the carving on the top. The ancient Greeks, of course, were the ones who were famous for putting elaborate capitals on top of their pillars. But this is equally, to me, equally clever and equally beautiful, done in wonderful Kerala woods, I guess teak, but maybe mahogany. Again, I don't know enough about forestry to say that with conviction. The beams that hold the roofs up, these wonderful, again, presumably insect-resistant beams, because I think in the case of this house, it's been there for a very long time, more than 100, well more than 100 years. If it's associated with Velutambi, it would have been there for 200 to 200 and something years. But again, the woodwork is, I think, of kind of world standard. I'm fond of this one because this is supposed to have been C.V. Raman Pillai's bed, but it's a very elaborate bedstead, it seems to me. But again, beautiful work, presumably done by Kerala craftsmen. The carving on a wall in the Velutambi house. Again, another illustration of this. The public images were something you can't avoid when you are riding around Kerala, or you couldn't in those days because the cars went more slowly, I guess, than they do now. And the statues are something that, of course, were very popular for a very long time in Western culture and picked up with great enthusiasm, I think, in Kerala from the end of the 19th century. I have to say, this is my favorite. I think it's a lovely statue. And it survived very well from the late 1890s when it was put up. And it's the statue that makes Statue Junction. And, I've had people say to me, oh, we'll meet you at Sati, Sar Tima Madhavarao, the great Divan of Travancore, I think one of the makers of modern Kerala, even though he wasn't a Malayali and didn't live here beyond his term as Divan, but it's a great statue to a very significant kind of man. And Velutambi, of course, is a more recent statue inside the safety of, I should say too, Madhavarao is unprotected, and he seems not to have been desecrated too much, because statues, of course, are out there in the public eye and take a beating very often. They certainly do in Australia. This Velutambi statue is more recent, post-independence. Lovely statue in the grounds of the Secretariat, so a little bit better protected. This one, again, has survived, or had survived till 1983 very well, I'm pretty sure, Maharaja Ramavarma XV of Cochin. Now, he, to me, was the great Maharaja who resigned in 1914, gave up his Gadi, when, as far as I can tell from what I've read, the British wouldn't let him go further with his legislative reforms. He had an idea that he was going to create a much more responsible and representative council, and the Brits didn't want that to happen because it would have made them look a little bit bad, as if they were dragging their feet. So he said, well, thank you, I will take sannyas, and I think he did, and lived till 1932. But it's a lovely, or it was, I hope it's still there, a lovely statue in Thrissur. And of course, the wayside shrines are particularly noticeable in Christian areas, but not solely in Christian areas. You can see them for politicians and so on. But this one, I think, is particularly lovely. And I'm also a great admirer of Saint Sebastian, because he seemed to take an awful lot of punishment and still be quite a good man for all of it. And this one in 1983 was at a roadside shrine in Palu Thuruti. And finally, the ultimate in public display is a good bookseller and magazine seller, where you could, in Kottayam in those days, get A.K. Gopalan, E.M.S. Namboodiripad, the Virgin Mary, John the Baptist, Christ, and Ram, Sita, Lakshman, Hanuman, all on the same wall. and apparently living in harmony together. I hope so. Finally, or not finally, I have one or two more things to say, but the photographs, people, when we visited them to look at the houses, would all occasionally get the very correct idea that we were interested in old things, and they would bring out old family photo albums. This one, in fact, was a large photograph of a painting that had been done at some stage of Velutambi. And it was in the Velutambi house in Nanjanad. So it's a photograph of a painting, but nevertheless being displayed very, very proudly as a distinguished representative of the past. This one is, again, a photograph of a photograph, but again, he's such an interesting man. He's a contemporary, he was a leading Nair reformer and bureaucrat, lawyer, I think, of the late 19th, early 20th century, and I think a great crony of C.V. Raman Pillai. The photograph is in the album at Roscote Bungalow. And similarly with this man, who for me has always been a fascination. He died very young, in his mid-40s, and he had been chief secretary, even at that stage, of the old Travancore state. And he was tipped in the sort of gossip that went on in the newspapers of the day, that he was going to be the next Divan of Travancore. And of course, he would have been a Nair Divan. And the British rather liked to have outside Brahmins as Divans of their princely states, because they felt they were more mobile and probably not going to set up residence in the state. They would be more likely to play the game the British wanted played. But Pitana Pillai died suddenly, and I'm not quite sure why, in 1902, way too young. But it's a lovely photograph of him. Finally, you can't travel in Kerala without encountering people, and there are a number of photographs of people just going about their daily work. I was interested in Andikad because of its toddy tapper union that had been very highly aggressive and very agitational in the 1940s and 50s. And in 1983, there were still clearly toddy tappers. This one going about his daily job. He's even got with him his little tin for catching toddy and his ladder for getting up trees. This again is a favorite of mine because it represents the staff at the Trivandrum Hotel. It doesn't include Mr. Pisarodi, who was the general manager, or K.C. Pillai, who was the owner, and a very fascinating and delightful man, a very kind man too. These were women cleaning grain in the Ellencat house in Nanjanad. And the last one is just the uncle of an old friend at St. Mary's Church, Kuruvillangad, coming out of Mass, and he asked, would we take his picture? In fact, his nephew said, would you take his picture? And he was more than happy to be photographed. The interesting thing is the style of the jacket and so on for the old Syrian Christian gentleman. So that's really what I've got to say about the photographs. The next talk will, we hope, involve specialists who can elucidate on some of the unanswered questions that my imperfect photographs have thrown up. But and I hope people who are watching now may want to join that meeting in a week's time. For now, I'm happy to deal where I can with any questions, and I'd be very happy, of course, to have people comment and fill out some of the detail that I've related here, and also to correct things that I've said that may be erroneous, where I may have got it wrong. So with that, let me throw it back to our moderator, who is, I think, checking the chat lines to see what sort of chats are coming in. Aditi, will you
Right here,
take it
right
from
here.
there, as they say?
Yes, right here. Well, I completely agree with Oscar Burgess, who says, I'd like to know what kind of equipment you used to document these houses. This seems very well exposed for film. And that's actually one of the things that struck us when we saw the photographs, that the whites are real whites, the blacks are real blacks, and every tonal variation in between has been captured. So, Oscar, that's your question for Robin. He actually told us a bit about this in the beginning, but Robin, maybe you can tell us once more about the camera that you used.
Yes, when I knew that I wanted a camera, I let it be known before Christmas in 1982 that I needed a camera. But I also asked some of my friends who were good photographers what would be the best camera for a novice that would give really decent photographs. And they recommended this Nikon, and it wasn't cheap. It was about $150 40 years ago. So it was a good camera, but the beauty of it was a simple camera. It had a light reader of its own, and providing you got fairly close in, you could take nice photographs with it. I'm sorry I no longer have that camera, but if it ever became an issue, I gave it to a camera-loving friend in Singapore, and I'm sure will still have it because it was a bit of a curio for him, and he had a little collection of cameras. So it'd be nice, and if the questioner is interested enough, I can inquire and see whether my friend Yusuf can find the camera and he would be able to give us precise details about what kind of a lens. And we were shooting good black and white film, and we were shooting it at a kind of moderate speed. The camera was taking it. We weren't noticeably slow the way you would be if you were trying to take photographs with a lens camera. It was just the kind of thing you would get in a good fixed lens camera.
Do you remember the model by any chance?
No, other than it was an icon. I'm sure if we went online, I could probably find it. But from if there's curiosity, my friend Yusuf, who is the inheritor of it, will still have it, I think, and would be delighted to engage in some sort of camera detective works.
Okay, and as a continuation, Oscar asks, how did the locals react to you taking photographs? Were they curious or happy to have it taken? Like, for example, Uncle at St. Mary's Church.
Yes, I mean, the uncle photograph came about very much because his nephew said, oh, he'd quite like to be photographed. And I was, of course, itching to photograph him because he's a lovely looking man in a lovely looking costume with his spectacles in his pocket. It's very kind of Kerala. All he lacks is the umbrella to be, a respectable elderly man going about his daily business. I had a Trivandrum friend who used to say, if you couldn't get a job in Kanyakumari, you bought a diary, an umbrella, and came to Trivandrum and walked up and down the street looking important. So, and I think that was an envy of somebody like this who clearly had a career. The old gentleman in the photograph has had a career as, I'm guessing, some sort of bureaucrat, and leads a very respectable kind of life in retirement.
Okay, we have Sharat Sundar, who has given us an update on the various houses that still stand. Roscote House in Thiruvananthapuram and Talakulathu Valiyaveedu, that is this Veluthampi's house in Nanjanad, still stand. However, the Elangam house in Neyur is now in ruins, and the family has plans to reconstruct the sprawling structure. We would love to know more, Sharat,
Oh, yes.
to share with us some more. Once we are done with the Q&A, maybe Sharat, you can switch on your video and tell us a bit more about. Rose asks, have you visited Kerala recently? And we would love to hear what you think about the changes.
Not since COVID. The last time I was in Kerala was just before COVID, the end of 2019. And COVID, of course, struck soon after. And I was mostly only around Trivandrum. And yeah, I have to say that walking down MG Road, or well, you don't really walk down MG Road anymore, you dodge down MG Road. But doing that, it looked it looked like any sort of town in North India with a lot of concrete buildings on both sides. Nearly all the old structures seem to have gone, except of course the Secretariat in all its glory and 1860s dignity. But the old Higginbottoms had gone. People will remember there was a wonderful Higginbottoms there. Now, I mean, we know that's life. Things change, and the population of Kerala, even Kerala now, is about 35 million, I think, which is 10 million more than the whole population of Australia, crammed into an area about the same size as the island of Tasmania. So, the things are different, and people have to live somewhere, and people want to drive cars and not have to walk in the rain with an umbrella. It's all very well to say the umbrella is the signal of the Malayali, but it's only because there's no better shelter from the sun and the rain than an umbrella if you're on feet having to walk. So I'm nostalgic.
Yeah.
That's probably the best summation. But I still love being in Kerala. You can still get a good rice meal in a cheap restaurant and all the things that I used to like so much.
Yes, so we have a lot of people resonating with your rendition of Kerala today, and I really feel you because at the moment the number of cars on the road is just so many, and everyone has an SUV almost. So it's really difficult getting around. We have Salina asking you if you can suggest some sources related to this topic, especially the housing patterns in late 19th century Kerala. And if there's anyone else on this group who would like to share sources, please do so. We'd love to hear from you as well.
I wish I did. I mean, my sources long ago when I was doing serious archival research tended to be the things like Nagamaya's Travancore State Manual, the census reports, that kind of documentation. And at the beginning of my research in Kerala, my Malayalam was just beginning. I was just learning the alphabet. Later, I could read sufficiently to read headlines and know where there were things. If it looked interesting, I could get a more elaborate translation. But in those days, I wasn't aware of anything. I would have loved to have the answer to the question that our questioner has asked. I would like to have known a lot more about these houses, how these houses were built, who instructed the workers, where they came from. And I don't know that, but presumably there are architects in Kerala who have been so fascinated by these buildings that they have gone into this and will know a great deal more than I do. And perhaps we can flush some of them out if the Kerala Museum is so inclined.
Yeah, we'll be doing that. We'll be doing that over the next. I'm pasting the link of Mickey and Madhvi Desai's wooden architecture here if anybody wants to take a look at it. But if there are any other sources, please do share. Yeah. Sharat Sundar says, Dr. Asha Lata Tampuran's Traditional Architectural Forms of Malabar Coast is a good book to study the typologies. Thank you, sir.
Indeed, yeah.
Yes. And then Rachel had a question.
Hi, yes, it was a question from the team. We were interested in sort of how did your background as an academic historian influence the way you framed or composed these photographs or choose the subjects for these photographs?
Can you add some more volume to the question, please, Aditi? I didn't hear it all. I didn't get the last bit.
I'm gonna read that question again. How did your background as an academic historian influence the way you framed or composed your photographs?
I wasn't that conscious. Really, the only advice I'd had, I think, is the advice I may have spoken earlier. If your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And that was the advice my friends were giving me who were good photographers, when I was asking them about how should I take photographs. They said, get close. If you're in tight, you can't make too big a mess of it because you'll have something. If you're back too far, people won't be able to tell an elephant from a stray dog because the distance will be too great. So yeah, that was probably the only thing in my mind, was to try to get as close as I could to the objects or the people or the houses that I was looking at, to put as much of the shape of the house or the shape of the door in the frame as I could. And I think I got better at it. After 1983, I never failed to have a camera, and everything I did after that, I used the camera as just a great research tool, because it let you remember things that you hadn't jotted down at the time. So yeah, nothing particularly intellectual about the way I was doing it. Minimizing stupidity was the real recipe.
Which reminds me, you also did make detailed notes in your journals. So it was not only the photographs, there was also the written notes, right? So this is just from the point of view of someone doing research. My question is really to do with that. There were a lot of photographs that were lost because you didn't have a camera before you finally got your camera. What do you think you missed out on from those years, as well as for someone who's doing research today, and the phone is a handy tool, as well as, there's so much of media and documentation, but from your study, your writing that was parallelly going with this kind of trip up and down Kerala that was driven mainly by curiosity, I wanted to kind of ask you to tell us a bit more about that curiosity, that whole lateral thinking that was happening simultaneously, both these two tracks being pursued at the same time, in terms of how to be more curious as a researcher, and how does it inform your main practice?
When I came as a researcher in ⁻71 and lived most of the year in and around Trivandrum, I would have been so much, my experience would have been so much richer if I had had a camera with me. I used to work in various archives and libraries around Trivandrum, and just to photograph some of the things that were in those libraries, the interiors of them. In those days, the old Travancore government records were kept in the cellar of the Secretariat, one of the adjacent buildings virtually across the road from the Trivandrum Hotel, and there was a basement there. And in that basement were letter books going back to the 1820s, 30s, and 40s, falling apart if you opened them. I opened them once or twice, and they virtually dissolved in my hand, so I just put them back and left them because they would have taken a lot of preservation. But if you'd had a camera, you could have done this. And the other aspect of that was the wonderful group of people who worked in the underground record office at the Secretariat, because there were 3 or 4 stalwarts, and each one of them was worth a novel by R.K. Narayan, because they did their jobs, and they had a very intelligent view of the world and how to get by and how to survive, and they were just an interesting mixture. So people like that would have been wonderful subjects for photographs. And of course, a photograph in 1971 was a really big deal. I have studio photographs taken with friends where we made the booking a week in advance, and we all put on our best clothes and walked down to the photographer and sat, all we needed. If we had been Saabs, we would have had a dead tiger at our feet,
Yes.
Posing with a rifle. But in fact, we were just sort of sitting there looking very upright and respectable. And none of us smiling, of course, always looking a bit bit severe. Trying to put on my photograph face, but the so yeah, those sorts of things. In terms of what one of the views that I used to think was one of the best I had ever seen was at the monastery of the Silesians near Kottayam, and I want to say Monument, but I don't mean, and I can't think of the name at the moment, but the monastery was an amazing building looking out over coconut paddy and then to a river. So you had a view from it that was really absolutely remarkable, with nothing but the biggest buildings in the view were churches, temples, and mosques. And they were sort of sat up like, what would we say, little mushrooms in this field of green, either the bright green of the paddy fields or the slightly darker green of the coconut, and then a river in the middle. Now, I can't locate it geographically, partly because I never quite knew how I got there. I was always taken by somebody. So in those days, the maps were hard to find. And so there were a lot of things missing that are now so taken for granted. The idea of having Google Maps would have been absolutely impossible for me to conceive of at that time. But yeah, I was starting out as a researcher, and so I learned an awful lot, not just about Kerala, but about note-taking and so on. Partly too, inspired by you people at the museum, I've gone back and found my detailed notes of the 2 or 3 of these houses, and they're interesting. They're mostly related to social issues and politics, but they are, I think, probably they'd be of interest to anyone who wanted to pursue the history of some of those houses a little bit further, as might happen in the course of the next few months, yes, if people become interested.
Yes. We have a question from Aparna. Thank you, Robin, for your generous contribution to the archive. Looking forward to go through them soon. My question is, by the 80s and the 90s, the Gulf houses were often cited as an aberration, a disjuncture in the dominant time-space imaginary of what Kerala was projected to be. Houses were one of the most contentious topics during then, as you have mentioned. Have you documented the new Gulf houses of the then Kerala? How do you think they challenged the aesthetic projections of a Savarna Kerala as Gulf migrants hailed from visibly weaker sections of the society?
I'm not an authority on Gulf houses, though I have photographs, and in the collection, I think there are 1 or 2 photographs of Gulf houses as they were developing in 1983, when they were just a new feature. And the friends I knew were often complaining about the nice old building having been knocked down to put out the concrete one with the vivid paint display. Mm-hmm. But today's architecture in Kerala, I haven't traveled enough in the last 10 years in Kerala to really have an opinion. I can imagine that more and more buildings are well, certainly there's more and more high-rise going in, I gather, throughout the whole of Kerala, particularly around Kochi, but in Malabar as well. And many of these buildings may not have taken sufficient account of drainage patterns and where rivers flow in heavy rains. And I think some of the problems that flooding is causing must stem from putting particular kinds of buildings in areas where they're going to find it hard to survive. The old Taravads, I imagine, were fairly well drained, in that they were built by people who had been around for generations and knew the way the rivers flowed when they overflowed, and that's perhaps not the case today. But no, I've got, as I say, I've got no particular insights into I think it's a very interesting question. I'd be certainly interested to hear people who talk about how the architecture of people returning from the Gulf has changed over the last 40 years, because it's two generations, and the houses built in 1980 may well today in 2025 be regarded as rather ugly and not nice, or as wonderful nostalgic things that should be preserved, like the Taravad. Maybe they should be made into dioramas and put in the museum. So not a lot of light to cast, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Yeah, dioramas are also a contentious topic.
Dioramas are, yes, yeah.
Oh, we won't go there just yet.
Yeah.
But I think the second half of your question, Aparna, I think we'll hold on to that, and maybe in the next part of this lecture that's happening on the 9th of September, maybe we will be able to look at some of those aesthetic ideas as well. Atul says, thank you for the talk, Dr. Jeffrey. Did you by any chance contribute to local dailies in Kerala with those photographs? Local dailies, I think he means, in Kerala with those photographs during the period of your research and exploration, providing an outsider perspective on changes coming over Kerala?
No, but what I really regret is that there isn't a photographic archive of Kerala, because newspapers like Malayalam Manorama and Mathrubhumi particularly had staff photographers for the last 40 or 50 years. Let's see, Malayalam Manorama was doing a terrific job of doing photojournalism back in the 1960s. And I'm not sure what kind of I haven't worked in Manorama for 40 years now, nearly 40 years now, so I don't know how Manorama have maintained their archives. I imagine in a very professional way. Similarly with Mathrubhumi and some of the other periodicals. But it's extremely difficult to find, even with the big English dailies of India, to get access to, or even to find first and then get access to some of the photographs of 50 and 60 years ago. And a photographic archive has never been more important, I guess, now that everything is digital, everything can be digitized. The originals, it seems to me, are important to have, because AI, if you don't have an original, AI will make one up for you. And that's, I prefer to work with the real thing. But again, that's a roundabout and non-answer to a question. But I don't know, and I've never contributed photographic stuff to a Kerala publication, or indeed to any reputable publication in any country, as far as I know.
Essentially, Atul, these have been sitting in a box for years until they now see the light of day. Very much intended. We'd like to ask you all, if there are no other questions for Professor Jeffrey, please switch on your videos so that we can take a screenshot of all of us together. And if there's anyone who'd like to contribute a story about a Taravad of your own, please do let us know. Please turn your cameras on. Thank you. Yes, there we are. I'm gonna ask you to stop share. Can you stop sharing, Robin?
Stop sharing, yes.
Yes. And we'll have all of us up here.
Yeah, next page.
Okay, yeah, if you're not comfortable with switching on your camera, please don't, but just be there anyway and don't run away. Yeah.
To the next.
Yeah, I'm just going to make it gallery view. Yeah. So if anyone has a story about that Taravad also that you would like to share with us, or if there's something that you've been covering, let us know. Yeah. Sharath?
I would like to say yes, Sharath here. First of all, thank you, Robin, for sharing these images, and Kerala Museum for organizing this. A little bit of information about the diorama that actually interested you. Um, I got to hear from my grand uncle. Now I am very sad that I didn't get the details from him. He passed away a couple of years back. He and myself belong to a family of craftsmen who were the ivory carvers in Travancore Kingdom. And this profession goes back to 1830s during the time of Maharaja Nonaswati Tirunal. And this grand uncle once told me that the diorama was indeed that it was made by his grand uncle and a team of other workers who were primarily family members. And as you observed, it was made sometime around 1920s. But I am not sure about those figurines that you see, those people that you see engaged in various activities. There is a very interesting connection because this family comes from a particular place known as Peta in Thiruvananthapuram. And there were these Christian people who used to make these dolls, little figurines. I don't know the material. Maybe it is some kind of wood that they used. But what is most interesting is that if you look at accounts from early 19th century, you find Europeans, while they travel along the coast, they stop by at Anjitanga or Anjango to buy these things. And there are several accounts of people, European officers, buying these things and taking it back to their ancestral places or estates. And they say that it's finely done. And today, I think in Thiruvananthapuram, there are no good specimens to be seen. I think in Tripunithara Museum, there are few dolls still exhibited in the museum there. So probably these craftsmen would have collaborated. So that collaboration was there until recently because these same craftsmen were making very ornate boxes, ornament boxes called Nettur Petti, which is very popular these days. And the kind of ornate work, it will be lacquered and there will be very decorative patterns that will be drawn onto the surface of these boxes. And these paintings or these decorative things were actually done by the Christian craftsmen. So I think these Christian craftsmen were the descendants of the people who would have once made those small human figures.
Well, that's wonderful. Perhaps Didi can give me your email address. I'd like to pursue it a little bit more with you in the next few
and I would like to add that while you were doing your research here, you would have met, I don't know, did you meet Mr. Rosecoat Krishna Pillai, who was the grandson of C.V. Raman Pillai?
Yes, I think it was he or his family that showed me through the house.
Yeah. He passed away a few years back. And he actually wanted to get in touch with you regarding a detail which you discuss in your book. That is, somewhere you discuss about his mother's wedding, which happened at Rosecoat. I think you would have told him some detail regarding a newspaper report on the marriage. Yeah, he wanted that, and unfortunately, we couldn't get him the details when he was alive. But the detail was found in British newspaper archives, and I wrote about it because he gave me those photographs of his mother and father taken on the day of marriage. And
I hope you preserved them carefully.
Yes, and I wrote a small article on that as well. It is very interesting because you have that very architecture in Roscoe House is kind of hybrid. It is not purely traditional Kerala architecture. You find a lot of colonial architectural influences as well. But the marriage ceremony is also very interesting because something unheard of in those days. Ring exchange took place on the day of the wedding, and a wedding cake was also ordered from a far off place. I think somewhere from Cochin state, and it was specially brought out to Thiruvananthapuram for that event. So there is this very beautiful and detailed newspaper report, which of course you would have
Would have been in
seen.
the Madras Mail, yeah.
Yes, I think so. Yes. Okay,
Wow, that was valuable. Sharath, thank you so much for
thank you.
that. Actually, Bilay Menon, I don't know if you know him, architect Bilay Menon,
Yes.
he suggested that we actually reach out to you as well.
He's a faculty
That's right.
in CET. I also am a faculty in CET, so
Yeah.
we know. Yeah,
Yeah. So for the next lecture, we expect you to join us once again, okay, on the
sure.
9th.
Yes.
We'll reach
Yeah.
out to you. I've asked you for your email address. Please send it to us. We'll reach out to you and we'll get in touch, okay?
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to share? Rachel will otherwise put up the poster for the next lecture as well. And as we go, I wanted to say also a huge, big thank you to Robin for his generosity, sharing his, Angela claps, yes.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Yeah, no, don't go yet. We're not done
Don't
yet.
go yet. Oh, I'm not gone. I'm
I know
still
it's
here.
very late. It's very late for Robin, everybody. It's actually
No, it's only 10 o'clock.
10 at night in Australia there. And yes, so we wanted to share the next poster so that you all can log in and join us. We'll be looking at specific objects and having people join us Robin, you're getting more thank yous on the chat as well. Yeah. And so do join us on the 9th of September. Before we close, I'd also like to acknowledge our sponsors, the Geojit Foundation that supports the Janal Talks and the Janal Archive. And yes, so see you all next time. For those of you who attended, do try to send us your thoughts on the lecture and if you have any other further suggestions for Janal, we would love to hear from you. We'll be emailing you with all of that information. Yes, so 9th September, Shifting Worlds, Storing Objects from Kerala. See you there. Thank you all for joining. And Robin, good night.
Good night.
It was great, fantastic. Yeah, we'll be closing the meeting soon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. In the chat box, we have the detail for the next talk, as well as if you want to follow or send us an email. The next one is also online.